Welcome to Fight Week. I'm Jake Aria, your host, and this week it was finally announced that Francis Ngannou is going to be taking on Tyson Fury in the boxing ring.
Well, guys, it's official. Me versus Francis Ngannou, 28th of October, in Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia. We cannot wait.
So, Francis now has his fight date, and regardless of what you think about the fight itself, the real story here is everything surrounding the fight. Ngannou has been talking about wanting to step away from MMA to try out boxing for years, and that was one of the main contention points between him and Dana White, and that all came to a culmination earlier this year when Francis Ngannou waited out his contract to exit the UFC. And it's no secret that the UFC and Francis Ngannou, let's just say, didn't end on great terms.
Francis just thinks that he's in a position where he's got some Conor McGregor-Mayweather fight on his hands, which he does not. Francis wants to take zero risks.
No, I'm not scared. The only thing that I'm scared of is to be trapped. It's not to lose my freedom, which I value very much.
However, it was announced that Francis would be signing with the PFL with an option to go explore boxing outside of MMA. And since then, it seems like the UFC has been trying to overshadow Ngannou in every one of his announcements. When Ngannou signed with the PFL, Dana White shortly after announced a very stacked 291 card. And then last week, Ariel Helwani leaked that the Fury-Ngannou fight was close to being announced, and then on the very same day, Dana White announces that Jones-Stipe is going to be happening at MSG. As of the filming of this video, Dana White has yet to comment on the official fight announcement, but earlier this year he did say that the idea of Francis Ngannou doing a boxing match was a gimmick fight.
And that's one of the big problems with boxing right now, is it's all about these gimmicky type fights. And that's just not what I do here. It's not what I do. MMA guys versus boxers doesn't make any sense to me.
And since that comment, Dana has enthusiastically promoted fights like Tyson Fury versus Jon Jones, but in the UFC octagon, as well as a super fight between Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, which has also had some surprising developments as well. Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg might just have their coaches lined up, some of them being MMA legends. In Zuckerberg's corner, he could be having Israel Adesanya and Alexander Volkanovski, while Elon Musk might have George St. Pierre, Lex Friedman, who's a jiu-jitsu specialist, as well as John Danaher, who's one of the best jiu-jitsu coaches in the world. And this all comes as the feud between the two billionaires seems to have increased, as Zuckerberg just dropped Threads, a new social media app that has a lot of similarities with Twitter. Now, in terms of the fight, Zuckerberg seems to have more experience in jiu-jitsu as he's been competing in tournaments recently, but Musk, on the other hand, has said that he's had experience in striking and been in many fights. Now, we have no idea whether or not this fight is actually going to happen, but do you know who is fighting this weekend? Jack Della Maddalena. This weekend, the rising prospect will be taking on a new opponent in Basil Hafez after two of his opponents pulled out due to medical reasons, the latter of which discovering that they had an undiagnosed brain condition during medical checks. Besides Della Maddalena's fight, Holly Holm will also be appearing on the card. However, there has been another fight scratch. Walt Harris will no longer be competing on the card this weekend after failing a USADA test, which he says was due to a tainted supplement, and says that it was completely unintentional. Alright, breaking news, Jamal Hill released a video last night saying that he has vacated his light heavyweight title after it was reported from MMA Fighting that he had ruptured his Achilles due to a basketball game that happened last weekend. Scott, now that this has happened to Jamal Hill, exactly the same situation that happened to Yuri Prohaska less than a year ago, what do you make of the situation, and has Jamal done the right thing here?
It's a really unfortunate situation. His star is on the rise this year after he beat Glover Teixeira to win the title, which of course was left vacant by Yuri Prohaska's injury. I think probably the right thing was done because realistically, his timetable, it sounds like, for a ruptured Achilles is somewhere 8 to 12 months. That's a long time to be out, could be even longer. And Yuri did the same thing in his same situation. So I think it's probably, I think he recognizes, hey, I got this opportunity because of this. I'm going to pay it forward. So I think good on him, but it is really unfortunate.
All right, and now that we know that Jamal Hill is out, what do you think is next for the light heavyweight division?
Well, they've got a lot of options over in the UFC. Of course, they could make the upcoming UFC 291 light heavyweight fight between Jan Blachowicz, former champion, and Alex Pereira. They could make that one. He's, of course, the former middleweight champion. They could make that. For the vacant belt, they could just have that be a #1 contenders fight and have the winner of that go against Yuri Prochazka later this year. So they've got a lot of options. They can go in a lot of different directions here. I wouldn't be surprised if they add some championship incentive to the UFC 291 fight with Pineda and Blahovic.
Alrighty, thank you so much for your thoughts, Scott.
So what do you think about the Ngannou-Fury matchup? And now that Jones versus Stipe has been announced, who do you think takes that fight? Let us know in the comments below. Tag New York Post Sports and use the hashtag NYP Fight Week for a chance to be featured in next week's video. Happy Fight Week, and I'll see you on the next one.